He told the story several times that it began to look like fiction, an ideal twisted thriller with a missing woman, a shocking lover, strange clue, and a man could not stop looking at the world. But it was not a novel. It was a bad dream in a cool California home. It began with a knock, a conflict, and then silence that spread over 2 long days. By the time the truth started coming to meditation, it was decided before coming into the headlines who to believe and who to doubt it. This is a true story called Press the Real Life Gone Girl. This is the story of Dennis Haskins, the person who accused him of disappearing, and how Hunt for Truth turned into a media storm that shook the country. On March 23, 2015, Dennis Haskins disappeared from a house shared with her lover, Aaron Quinn. Neighbors described it as a normal morning on a cool road, but the missing persons report became like a shock. Dennis's family became public with his grief, begging for the answer. Social media burnt with photos, principles, and prayers. For 2 stressful days, the world was waiting. Then suddenly, Dennis returned. She told the police that she was kidnapped, and before she managed to escape. His story was quite terrible to come true. Nevertheless, instead of rest, he had to face mistrust. Some detectives and many headlines were depicted as a deception to his account. Very soon, the nation divided into 2 camps, one who believed him and one who saw him false. The person later came to know that the suspect was Matthew Mueller. First, his name was barely known, but once the police and prosecutors dug deeply, a disturbed past emerged. Mueller was linked to the history of violent crimes, including domestic invasions and attacks. All were equally done in uniform fashion. It was only through DNA evidence and retest of old files that investigators began to piece the puzzle simultaneously. It seemed like a strange one story to look like a part of a big, deep pattern now. Note how soon the story was flipped. Journalists who ran to call the episode were suddenly faced with evidence that did not fit their early beliefs. The account of Dennis, who was mocked in the media, began to align with the proof collected by law enforcement. For the victims, this is a tragic pattern. Mistrust comes first and only forces the world to listen to later. The gap between doubt and truth is not measured in days or weeks. It is measured in permanent trauma made by the remaining people. While the headlines were in the headlines, the investigators surpassed the trail Mueller, a mark that would later form the backbone of the Netflix series, American Nightmare. Science slowly moved forward, but with accuracy. The advances in the DNA test allowed investigators to connect Mueller to previous unresolved offenses. The prosecutors accused him of attack and break-in, which once was isolated. With every new test result, the story moved from the Gone Girl Hawks label and towards the reality of a dangerous hunter. Dennis and Aaron, once depicted as false, were now seen as a terrible examination. But there was loss. Their names were dragged through public suspicion, and their pain was rejected as drawing attention. The speed of gossip left the pace of truth behind. Dennis found herself in a cruel spotlight. Live but painful, she faced questions that looked like allegations. Why did she go for 2 days? Why did she come back? Why did small details change from one to another in his story? These questions are that investigators should be asked, but when mediated by media headlines, they make deep cuts in the life of a survivor. The human cost of mistrust is real. It scares the victims, breaks faith in institutions, and poisons the way of behaving with future matters. Eventually, investigators pulled the threads together and caught it with Mueller. The old reports were dusted, the evidence was resumed, and the DNA database revealed the matches that had long been noticed. A pattern of similar crimes, sharing all similar methods, became clear. The suspect's past left a roadmap for detectives, and once made a connection, Mueller was exposed as a criminal of a repetition with a disturbing history. As a bizarre title about a missing woman, which began, was now recognized as part of the race for a major crime committed by a violent person. The label real-life Gone Girl got stuck to a great extent, as it gave the story a film like a film. But this comparison was misleading and even dangerous. The fiction provides clean objectives and streamlined end. Real life is never clear. The remaining people do not speak in the right time, and the trauma does not follow a script. The Netflix series forced the audience to see closely, with a story inconvenience to sit with, the inconvenience that had no easy reply. Behind the headlines, there were real people, Dennis's family made sleepless nights, desperate press conferences, and brutal whispers. Friends described Dennis not as a character, but as a real woman who used to laugh, cry, and love like someone else. Meanwhile, Mueller left behind a mark of violence that investigators could not ignore. In court, the story became more than who did what. This became a study of how we treat the remaining people, how we handle doubts, and how easily the facts can be buried under gossip. The big lesson is clear. The real life is not present to feed viral click or dramatic comparisons. It demands careful work, patience, and compassion. When the evidence takes time, that difference should be cautious, not cruelty. Forensic science, though slow, turns into whispering evidence, and left, even when their stories seem incredible, deserve the opportunity to listen without ridicule. Loss of mistrust can last longer than crime. Finally, the sensational label of real-life Gone Girl may have attracted attention, but it also took the risk of hiding deep truth. Forensic science and dedicated investigators eventually cut through noise. But by then, Dennis and Aaron had already finished a test by the media. Their pain reminds us that very soon, spoken words can do more damage in the form of violence. As soon as this story is closed, imagine being in Dennis's family's shoes during those early hours, clinging to hope, while strangers online called it a cheating. Imagine detectives, months later, move through old files and feel the spark of recognition when a clue finally coincides. When the truth came out, imagine relief, but also the bitterness to know how much damage had been done. Such stories force us to ask, do we continue to run to decide for a sensational title? Or we will learn to stay, wait for the facts, and respect the painful work to expose the truth? In this case, the truth was a film plot and far more darker than humans. And so I leave you with this question. Next time you see a title that claims that real life looks like a film, will you stop and watch the drama to see people, pain, and the facts hidden below?